call him by his title, Jessica, is seventh generation, he said. Opens the place up to the public every summer. Many of the great houses do now, you know, and does the occasional wedding or some such. Not a bad setting to launch a new life together, what? Wish I could have done that for my daughter, Allie, and her beau, but her mum says, save your pennies. A pretty picture won't keep 'em warm in winter. Too practical by half, that one. She was very wise, I said, taking the handle of my bag from him. Ralph's a dreamer, George said. That's part of his charm. But you'd have empty pockets, old chap, if it weren't for your wife, Kay. George clapped Ralph on the shoulder as the driver closed the hackney's door. True, and don't I know it? A former bobby, Ralph had retired due to injuries sustained during a crackdown on gangs by the Metropolitan Police. The drug pusher was caught, but Ralph's knee was a casualty of the operation. Opting out of a desk job, he'd exchanged a life pursuing criminals for one escorting tourists, although many of his customers turned out to be his previous law enforcement colleagues. My companion, Chief Inspector George Sutherland, was one of them. George Sutherland and I had met years earlier during a trip I'd taken to England to be the weekend guest of Marjorie Ainsworth, the reigning grande dame of British mystery writers. Marjorie had become old and feeble and was confined to a wheelchair, and I felt this might be the last time I would see her alive. Despite her advanced age and failing health, she'd recently completed what was being touted as her finest literary effort, Gin and Daggers, although there was growing controversy over whether she'd had the help of a ghostwriter. Yet none of that mattered to me. Simply being able to spend a weekend with this wonderful and wise woman whose book set a high bar for any of us other writers of crime fiction was a joy to contemplate. However, I wasn't the only guest that weekend at her imposing manor house outside London. A number of others had gathered, which made for spirited conversation, some of it occasionally contentious. Because she fatigued easily, Marjorie had retired to her bedroom the first night of my stay after having played the generous and welcoming hostess. At 3 o'clock that morning, I was awakened by a sound coming from the direction of her bedroom. Was it a weak female voice crying for help? I got out of bed and went to find out. Marjorie's bedroom door was ajar. I stepped inside and approached her bed. What I saw horrified me. Marjorie Ainsworth was sprawled on her back, a dagger protruding from her chest like a graveyard marker. Because of her fame, the investigation wasn't left in the hands of the local constable. Scotland Yard was called in, and Chief Inspector George Sutherland arrived to spearhead the inquiry. Not only was he charming, he was undeniably handsome, 6'4", impeccably dressed, and with eyes that were at once probing and kind. We ended up working together to bring Marjorie's murderer to justice, and in the process we developed what might be called a mutual infatuation. Over the years it became obvious that we were attracted to each other beyond solving murders, and we wondered whether one day we would give life to our romantic inclinations. It hadn't happened, at least not yet, and time spent together was limited. That was why I'd leaped at the chance to spend New Year's Eve with George at Castorbrook Castle. I'm Scotland Yard's favourite cabby, Ralph had informed me when George introduced us. Unofficially, of course. Had to bone up on yard history when I was in training. Couldn't let those knobs in their fancy offices know more'n me. London cabbies are required to go through an intensely challenging program, learning the history of 320 places of interest, as well as how to find all the streets in the city, a process that can take years. Those in training, knowledge boys, and more recently knowledge girls, often make multiple attempts at passing.